So for this very important and special address by Dr. Arvind Virmani, who we saw on the stage earlier today, a member of Niti Aayog, I will request Shubhajit to please escort him on the stage, and sir should be here in another 30 seconds.
So, really, three aspects I'm going to address in the limited time, and I will cut through some of them. So, first one is, so we are thinking about three levels here. We are currently a lower middle income country, becoming an upper middle income country and a high income country. So, how are we positioned for the future? So, I will say a little bit about GDP growth, employment, poverty, etc. Because there are a lot of myths and confusing reports you will keep reading in the papers. Second, I will look a little bit at the opportunities and challenges which are the demographic change, the demonopolization of manufactured exports, services unbundling, which is somewhat relevant to you, which is also connected to the issue of AI, which you are discussing and which was mentioned earlier. And we'll have less time for this, but I have, the challenges and opportunities from a domestic angle. One of the big challenges is in terms of basic education and skilling. You're all familiar with the legacy of bureaucratic socialism. You have to address or deal with the bureaucratic system, and the digital-phygital hybrid, which I mentioned earlier in the day. And then briefly at the projected outcome. Okay. So where do we stand? I'll focus on the growth and part. I have removed for shortage of time the social part, but if they are, I guess later on we'll have some question and answers, if there's time. Now here, this is all based on international data from WDI. And what we have here are two graphs, the blue one and the red one. The blue one is the relative growth of India relative to the world average, and the red one is relative to China. And two things you will notice, the individual points go all over the place. So you need to look at the trends. The reason why it's very important is what you often read in the papers is they are looking at some point in this relative to other. And you can basically get any view you want. You take a low point and a high point, you will get a very high growth. You look at it the other way, you'll get a very low growth. But it's very important to look at the trends. So two trends stand out. Those are the simple blue and red line. Relative to the global growth, per capita growth is what we look at as economists, because that's the underlying thing, because you don't have control over your population growth. So think of GDP as the multiplication of those two simply. And the two trends are very clear. One is that India's growth rate has been rising relative to that of the world over a period from 1980 onwards, which is depicted there. And secondly, the gap between the growth rate of China and India has started to close from roughly 2000, let's say. From the turn of the century. So in this sense, we are very well placed. When you look at, when people say average growth rate, world growth rate is going to go down, well, that does not worry me so much. Of course, that will affect how we grow, but the relative growth of India is going to continue to factoring. And the reason why I give it is because that is probably the best estimate of long-term employment trends and wage growth trends we have. And again, to cut the long story short, the red line is the trend in employment growth in this set of data from 2000 on, and the wage rate is the blue line, which is the rate of growth of both of these, right? So real wage rate growth has been accelerating, the blue line, and so has employment growth, but at a very slow pace. These are the 2 points I want to make here. So from these two perspectives, the stories which you read are not correct. And finally, For the more recent period, 7 years consistent data which we have, there are two ways we measure employment, and you can see both of those are on a clear upward trend. I won't go into the technical source of data, etc. But the point here is the same. Growth rate is doing well over this trend period. Don't get carried away when you're talking about 10 years from now, 25 years from now. You cannot just get stuck in day-to-day, quarter-to-quarter, year-to-year data. Okay, you have to look at the trends. Okay, and the trends are positive. So that's the labor. Now, again, I give this, though it's not directly of interest to much of you, because you'll keep reading it. There are a lot of critics who do not want to look at the data. And I'm giving a little data heavy, because otherwise it's everybody's opinion against everybody. But that's not true. There is now hard data on poverty. And you'll see those red lines. The red is good. That means poverty has uniformly gone down over the last 11 years. This is now solid comparative data from surveys. And there are two categories. I will just mention them on top, and the first set and the second set. The first one is what we have been talking about as poverty, and that has gone down over this 11-year period from 12% to roughly 2.3%, which is a dramatic reduction in poverty. And the second one, which you can think of as vulnerable population, which has gone down from roughly 53.6% to 21.8%. So poverty is increasing, and there's no doubt about decreasing, sorry, and there's no doubt about it. You know, I gave this talk at IIC, where people said, you overwhelmed me with data, okay? But when I go out, I see poverty. Okay, so my answer to that was, you go to the US, in US conditions you will see poverty, okay? You'll see homeless people. It's a different benchmark. If you keep raising the benchmark, there will always be poverty. There's no question about it. The point we have here is global comparisons, global measures, globally acquired data, okay? And that is for comparative purposes. You have to have the same standard. And those standards I've given you are the international standards, what is called the 1.9 or 2.12 poverty line, and so on. Okay, let me, so enough about where we are. I think we are in a good position to achieve those goals, which I'm going to come a little bit to. So the second part is about the opportunities and the weaknesses. So I see 3 or 4 big trends, 4 trends here. Some of them you have probably come across, and I'm going to say a little bit more about that, but just to give you the picture, one is the demographics, which is very, very important in a global context and internally. And this is going to be for those of you who operate on a global scale or the domestic. I'm not going to say so much about the domestic, but the same kind of analysis is applicable within India. The second one is supply chain, which has more to do with manufacturing, but I think it's important for everybody to understand, if nothing else, the general knowledge. The third one is services, which is important for all of you also, which is what I call the unbundling of services, and it has global implications and the opportunities that all of you will have globally. And of course the digital phygital, which I mentioned in the morning, where we are very well placed to innovate. So what is the demographics? Very complicated table there, but if you look at the red columns, the first column is the change in the working age population for various countries which are relevant to India, and India is at the bottom, in the last 30 years, and the projected growth from the UN. These are all international numbers, nothing, but I've just taken them and put it for analysis. So the second column is what is going to happen in the next 30 years. So the demographic change, you can see the whole developed countries are mentioned in the first part, upper middle income countries and so on. And if you look at somewhere close to the bottom, you see that Indonesia, Mexico, Vietnam and India were the only countries whose working age population share was rising. All of them are going to be declining except India. So this is the big demographic change which is going to affect world trade in goods, services and many other things. Okay? And it's very important. And though you may not see it significant, I've given this talk in many places, including to US administration and others, and it really shocks them. Okay? This is a huge trend which you must all be aware of, if nothing else for general knowledge. Okay? So the challenge for us, which is a comparative advantage at the left you'll see, is that in principle, we can be suppliers of low skill, medium skill, high skill labor, whether from India or from externally to the whole world. Okay? That's the key thing in which we have to make sure it happens. And how to take advantage of it, including the private sector. Government has its role, NGOs have a role, and private sector has a role. Okay, little bit about the supply chains. Again, it may not be of direct interest to you, but I've just kept a few graphs, one graph here, which is, what this tells you is the manufacturing. That's where the focus here is on manufacturing. So this is the country share of world manufacturing value added. And two things you will notice. One is that China, which is the red line, has just been going up and up and up. Okay? Contrary to what people will tell you, there's nothing to do with market economics or comparative advantage. It's a decision which the Communist Party took, and they keep doing it. Okay? So they are not a market economy. I don't have time to go into the details. It's what I call a socialist market economy, of which I wrote a paper. My first paper on that was 2006, which is roughly 15 years ago. But people still do not understand the difference between a market economy and a socialist market economy. But the point here is, and then India you will see at the bottom. So India is the 5th largest manufacturer in the world, surprisingly, but it's the 15th ranked in terms of exports of manufactured goods. And that is the basic problem which we have. This difference between share of manufacturing value added and exports, and the basic problem here is quality. I won't go into the detail because of lack of time. Okay? So this is the problem which we are trying to address. Very briefly, one of the reasons is we missed the bus on getting manufacturing supply chains into the country through what we call anchor investors. Initially, it was our negative attitude towards FDI. Most of you are probably too young to know. We actually threw out IBM in the 1970s, because of various things we didn't like. Other countries, starting with South Korea, Malaysia, South Korea in the 60s, Malaysia in the 70s, Thailand in the 80s, China in the 90s, and so on, Vietnam now, welcome these, and therefore they set up these supply chains which are now beating everybody, including us. So we missed the bus. We are now trying to catch up. We have a last opportunity for getting these MNCs or MNEs into the country to set up these supply chains because of, I'm sure you read this geopolitics, the China +1 or whatever people call it, de-risking, some people say. I call it high-tech decoupling and partial economic decoupling. And this is an important trend which will actually filter into other things also. Just to make that connection with your industry, if there are more international companies coming, they would also need different types of non-life insurance. So it's useful to know the trend. Okay, let me I won't go into the details because, and finally, I don't want to leave the impression that it's going to be easy, but the key problem we have on education, we have focused too much, we have focused on access versus quality, okay? The new education policy which was done by this government recognizes this problem for the first time, officially recognizes. This problem was not recognized earlier. The focus of the government in the previous 10 years was to provide access. That means get everybody into school. Okay? What we find is there is a huge problem of quality. I don't know if this has a pointer, but if you look at that green on top where it says 46.3 and 43.9, you can see the green. What that shows, that number is for 2017 because that's the only global comparison we have, globally comparative number. That shows that of the people, of the children who have completed primary education, only 41.7 can read at the minimum level in that year. We now have data from ASER on rural, similar sort of thing in rural. We are not too bad compared to our per capita income, but if we are going to become an upper middle income country and a high income country, which I'm just going to come to, we have to do much better. We have to improve this a lot. And again, this whole digital learning, expert systems, I was just talking to an IIT professor who uses AI, and I asked him that 20 years ago I used to talk about expert systems. Please explain to me what is the connection between that and AI. And he did. I won't bore you with the details. Okay? But we have to use digital, we have to use hybrid systems, we have to use all the possibilities to raise this level of teaching and learning. And it is possible. It is not like they say rocket science. It can be done. Okay. So, final part of my, okay, I'm doing pretty well on time. So where do we want to be? So I have showed you that where we are, what are the big opportunities and challenges, and then we can overcome them in my view, and where do we want to go. So the goal is to become an upper middle income country. I think it's feasible. We are currently what is called a lower middle income country. Okay? We want to become an upper, you of course all heard that we are the 5th largest country and we will become the 3rd largest. Here I am talking about per capita GDP, which gives the level of welfare. Okay? It's how are we, our people on average. Of course we are 1.4 billion people and you may be comparing with a country of 1 million people or 10 million people. So the GDP depends on the population. But when we talk about development and welfare, we talk about per capita GDP. There are no contradiction, but they are different things. I mean, they are related but different. Okay? So here we are talking about per capita GDP. So, our goal is to become a high-income country by 2050. And all these definitions, just again for your general knowledge, when we are doing comparative stuff on welfare, we have to use per capita GDP at PPP. When we are comparing insurance market, manufacturing, etc., you can do in many different ways. You can take current dollars comparison, it's all valid. I'm not saying it's not valid, okay? But as an economist, I do it in terms of real projections, which have to be based on PPP if I want to compare in economic terms with any other country, and particularly welfare, okay? So that, I just wanted to leave that with you. It doesn't matter, just for your general knowledge. So what I do is I take the projection. There is OECD projection for most of those countries I mentioned earlier. But for India, I put my own numbers. And it'll be very interesting. I'll just give you a comparison of what's going to happen in my view. And then we'll conclude. Because I won't have time, I'm not talking about the social parameters, but we have done all that. That's all available. I should mention there is a working paper we have on the NITI website, which you can download, which has all these numbers and much more analysis, which you might find, some of you might find useful if you deal in the future. Okay, so here is these are evolution of the Indian economy. That is the red line there. Just briefly explain to you what I have done. So this underlying the red line is an average GDP growth, real GDP growth of 6% over the next till 2050. Okay, very roughly, the current decade it's about 7%. Next decade it's 6%, and after that is 5%. So average you can see is roughly 6%. Okay, but there are detailed numbers year by year, but those are not important. The important thing is the trend. Remember when I talked about the BCG projections, the important thing is the trend, because you can never predict the future perfectly. It's always wrong. Okay? I should add, I take pride that my projections have been better than anybody else in the world about India. I've been wrong about Russia, by the way. I don't have any problem admitting it. Okay, so the red line is India based on that 6% average assumption, and this is a measure of, I have an index called VIP, which roughly reflects what you people generally deal with, the dollar value. But it is not that. So please keep in mind, but more or less within a few years, or plus minus, the dollar value which you normally look at will come to more or less this. That's why I wanted to tell you. Okay, so what does this show? So the yellow, let's start from the bottom. The blue line is China. Okay, it has gone way above the yellowish, orangish line, brown, yellow, no, it's hard to see. Okay, is Russia. And the red line is India. The green one is the EU as a whole. And one, the level which is one is the USA. So everything is on the base of USA. So what do we see? What we are seeing is that actually Russia, which is not doing so badly. And the reason why I mention is because there's been a complete revision of the data, international data on which I base it. My previous projections thought that Russia is nowhere because the data was flawed. Now, whether that was biased or what, I don't know, but I use international data that has been revised upwards. So Russia will actually be the 4th largest economy, even at 2050, according to this latest data and my projections. Okay? So you can see the Chinese economy has been shooting up, and the projections show that given OECD projections about China, the blue line, we are going to overtake the EU by around 2047 and almost catch up with China by 2050. So that is the big message from my latest forecast. Let me repeat, the forecasts I did a year ago, which are in my paper right now, had to be revised because the basic data from the international organization has completely changed. Okay? So I cannot take responsibility for that. I have to use that data because otherwise nobody believes me, right? So I have to take the basic data from, I take from military and all, I'm not going to give you here, from CIPRI, and I take all the economic data from WDI. So let me conclude. So what is the conclusion? I was going to make the connections with insurance, but I think I've run out of time, so I'm going to finish this, okay? So we are well placed. There'll be a large expansion of financial sector. You already have the BCG reports. That's broadly correct. So if you want to know the numbers, I think you should just go and read those. I'll make a plug for them. I'm quite impressed by their work. New opportunities, I've already mentioned, must be grabbed, and we have to address old challenges. You know, one of the problems I face is that we have two groups of people. This is the last point. Some are people who are just stuck on the left side here, that India is way down there, right, on the left. They are pessimistic. They keep thinking, oh, we will never get anywhere. Then there are people who look at the right end of the spectrum and say, we are already there. We don't need to do anything. Both are wrong. We have a huge challenge. We have to get from where we've crossed that yellow line all the way up there. Lots of things to be done. I hope all of you will participate in doing those things. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. A big round of applause for Dr. Virmani, Honorable Member, Minister of State Rank, Niti Aayog. Thank you so much, sir. Few know that sir holds 50 years of experience and has encapsulated lifelong learnings for us in this PowerPoint and his special address today. He is also a PhD from Harvard University. Thank you so much, Dr. Virmani, for your kind address today for our amazing audience here. Thank you, sir.